All right, ladies and gentlemen, calling the meeting to order. At the last day, we had Mr. Keurik's motion up for discussion. I have the speakers list from last day. I'll go to Mr. Keurig. Mr. Fergus is next after him. Mr. Keurig.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I was just asking to continue the debate. I'm not sure. I apologize for my ignorance, being a new member. But in terms of moving to proceed with the motion that we had adjourned debating, are we continuing on that?
Absolutely. So, Mr. Keurig, you are welcome to speak to
Sure.
the motion that is on the table currently.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I appreciate this opportunity to once again enter into debate in what is an incredibly important subject, and certainly captured much of the attention of Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And the motion that is at hand is very, very simple. It simply asks that we have full disclosure of the relationship between other members of Cabinet and the We Charity and the decision-making process. Each day, it seems, there is further information revealed about this ongoing scandal. And of course, many of us, I'm sure, were watching the testimony yesterday at the Finance Committee, as I'm sure we will be all in rapt attention tomorrow. But the continuing revelations of connections, of lack of consistency in testimony, of the information that seems to be uncovered on a daily basis, I think speaks for itself when it comes to why a motion like the one that I presented last week is so important. It ensures that the very basic questions that Canadians are asking simply get answered. And that's what connections exist between members of Cabinet and the We Charity, and whether or not members of Cabinet knew about the conflict of interest that has become increasingly clear, and even just the ambiguity that exists between what these relationships look like. We had yesterday the Kielburgers mentioned that they had limited contact with members of Cabinet, that they wouldn't have called themselves friends of the Prime Minister. Well, we've heard all of these things before in the first Trudeau report, which found the Prime Minister guilty of ethics violations regarding to his friend, and I say that in quotes, friend the Aga Khan. So I think that Canadians deserve answers. This is a simple process, simple procedure that simply asks those that were tasked with making a decision regarding close to $1 billion. It simply asks for the information to be given to Canadians, the answers to be given to Canadians, and quite frankly, the answers that all Canadians deserve. So I look forward to what I hope is a productive debate on the issue. Look forward to being able to hopefully seeing this pass. And I would encourage all members of this committee from every party that we would be able to be productive and proactive to ensure that we have that attitude in mind to move this conversation forward, get the answers that Canadians deserve, and hopefully be able to move forward. And I would certainly ask that each member consider supporting this motion as it attempts to do that very thing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Shanahan. I'm so sorry. Mr. Fergus.
Eh bien, merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm not sure if this point was raised, but if from time to time you could read the speakers list to us, then it's a nice way to make sure that everyone knows where they are on the list of people who would like to speak to this debate. It's just a friendly suggestion. I listened to my honourable friends and colleagues' comments. Mr. Keurig, And I read his motion attentively as well. Madam Chair, I hope that it's a bit unusual, but I hope that you'll agree with me. My honourable colleague says that his motion is quite simple. Unfortunately, it's not so simple. My colleague, Mr. Gerritsen, when we last met on last Friday, demonstrated, quite simply, that this is not a simple motion. He used his own example, in which he had several cousins and brothers and sisters, and all of those people would be asked to provide our committee with documents because in reading the motion, in the third paragraph, it says, additionally, the letter should require that all members of cabinet disclose whether they, their families, or their relatives have connections with We, Me to We Corporation, and so forth. Madam Chair, who are the families or relatives that were me, my children, my parents? Does that include my brothers and sisters? Does that include my cousins? Does that include close friends? My wife's family, my children's relatives, my grandchildren, my parents, and so forth. I mean, where does it end? Frankly, this is not a simple undertaking. That's the least one can say with respect to this motion. And if I did have a question to ask, Madam Chair, because I can see that my colleague would like me to conclude my comments, I do have a question to ask him through you, the Chair.
A question. Does my honourable colleague view this motion that it has an effect of seeking to produce documents from my family members, from my relatives, as large as that could be, to produce these documents, from the interested parties that he's trying to seek here, in an effort to really get an understanding of as to who's involved, who's been involved with this organization, and if so, under what form should they produce these documents? So that's a question which I would have for my colleague. I'd hope in his opportunity to speak when he's further down the speaking list to respond to that question. That would be very helpful to me, not in terms of my consideration as to whether or not to support this motion. But Madam Speaker, it just bears witness is that, again, it sounds simple, but it gets really complicated. And, again, and I sound a little bit like a broken record, and I'm trying to keep everything innovative here, and I'm not trying to wear down the clock, but I really have to ask all our honorable colleagues around the table, do we want, when I take a look at this motion, like the other motions that was passed last week, do we really want a situation where members of Parliament are investigating other members of Parliament? I really do believe this is something that we should let the Ethics Commissioner do. We can encourage the Ethics Commissioner. We can call the Ethics Commissioner here. On peut lui poser des...
We could invite the Commissioner here, ask questions of the Commissioner, ask the scope and extent of of her investigation, encourage her to follow certain types of investigation, certain avenues of investigation, perhaps ask her to go further. Than the Commissioner was even planning on going. However, and we can make many suggestions to the Commissioner, but really that is the Commissioner's job. And if the Commissioner finds it pertinent and relevant to go further, then the Commissioner will do so. But if we're now saying that we're seeking all of this information, not only from the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's family, Katie Telford, Seamus O'Regan, and now all Cabinet members, as well as their families and relatives, then why not ask all MPs for this information? Why not ask everyone across this whole country? Where does it end? This is what concerns me. I hope my comments will make you think about whether we could adopt a motion that's not so broad and vague as this one. If we wish to adopt this motion, and I always say the best decision is not making a decision, or let me clarify those comments rather, not making this decision, and that we allow the Commissioner to decide upon the scope of her investigation, that the Commissioner be invited as a witness before our committee, that we encourage the Commissioner to pursue certain avenues of investigation. But if we decide to go forward in this manner, where does it end? And when? Madam Chair, unfortunately, these questions have remained unanswered, or at least the responses have not been satisfactory. And we know that if we're going to go down this road, we can do so with many other subjects. We could launch investigations on just about anything, because we're simply seeking a partisan advantage. If that's not the goal here, and it shouldn't be the goal of this committee, it does not fall under our mandate and our responsibilities. I fear that if we start with this, it'll never end. However, before I close, I do salute the decision that we made last week within the framework of a bad decision, that we'll do the best we can with the decision that was made. But we did decide to limit this and make explicit what it is you're saying in camera. And so we can minimize the possibility that this fishing expedition underway will not damage people who have practically nothing to do with politics. They just happen to be members of a family or relatives of certain people, because, as I said, when you read this motion, it's very broad. Its scope is huge. So I will end on that, Madam Chair, and I sincerely hope that my colleagues will consider my comments today. Thank you.
Next on the speaking list, we have Ms. Shanahan, followed by Ms. Briere, Mr. Angus, Mr. Keurig, and Mr. Joang. Starting with Ms. Shanahan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. And I, too, must express my dismay at the motion in front of us. I see that it has been some additional text was written following an earlier motion that was presented and retracted, and the additional text having to do with pursuant to the Standing Order 108-3H7 and to the committee's current study to review, and I stress that word, review, the safeguards which are in place to avoid and prevent conflicts of interest, and there might be a grammatical error there, and federal government procurement, contracting, grant contribution, and other expenditures. So this is a study that this committee has agreed to undertake, but this motion goes on to to add to that motion with instructions that I'm wondering are even in order. And I think that the problems are, let's look at the fact that we're asking the chair to write a letter to each member of cabinet to disclose whether they had knowledge of the personal relationships between those listed and we, and there's a whole list of the we organizations. We're not talking about, there's no framework here. Later on, we're talking about that this be prior to the Cabinet's decision to award the administration of the Canada Student Services Grant. What does that timeline look like? What are the dates that we're talking about? What are, how is someone receiving this letter? Where are they to start? What are they to make of this request? And as my colleague pointed out, later on, when we ask about their families or their relatives, whether they have connections, again, what are we talking about there? So who is your family? And I don't know if we'll have the opportunity to hear from every member here as to who their family members are, but I myself have a couple of exes and a number of children. I shall not name them here for their own privacy. In my family, 8 brothers and sisters. Again, hard for me to keep track even of who the spouses are and partners and the number of nieces and nephews that I have. It's a moving target. It is indeed. Families are fluid today. Families are flexible, and we love every one of them, but they didn't sign up for this kind of disclosure. Who are the relatives? Even going out farther in the family line. And I can tell you, coming from a good Irish Catholic family, yes, I have over 65, again, lost track of the cousins there, the first cousins. And they're all doing well, though, I'm happy to say. Thank goodness for Facebook. But it is, it's very concerning that this is the kind of net that this committee wishes to throw out there. I don't think the Canadians listening to us would agree that that's entirely appropriate for this committee to be doing. So that is, I have many concerns about this resolution, and not the least is that I don't see how it's helpful to the work of this committee in that we want to review the safeguards which are in place to avoid and prevent conflicts of interest. I believe what is wanted to be said there in the federal government procurement, contracting, grant contribution, and other expenditures. And I think that's what Canadians want to understand, is that this committee is executing its responsibility to make sure that the ethics commissioner, the lobbying commissioner, the different independent, nonpartisan commissioners that we have in place who have full powers to compel any document, to question any person that they deem necessary to be able to say that they can undertake their job. So I think that's again, I'm very concerned about this motion, and I hope that the other members of this committee will reconsider it. Thank you.
Madame la Présidente, je vais continuer dans le même sens que mes collègues. Maman a une famille de...
Madam Chair, I'll keep going in the same vein. I have a lot of family members. Many of my brothers and sisters have 3 or 4 children. I would cross them on the road and I wouldn't be able to recognize them. I even have family in the Dominican Republic.
Je me pose...
So this is what I'm wondering as well. How the opposition parties will define families, relatives in this context? And why are they casting such a wide net for information that may be confidential or personal? Also, along the same lines, it says,
Est-ce qu'on parle de...
what does prior to mean? Are we talking about the day before the decision, the week before, the month, 2 months? There's no indication of a timeline. So I think that merits debate as well. Furthermore, as my colleague Brenda was saying, it's hard to keep track of everyone in one's extended family, especially if you have a large family. It's a work in progress. There are regular changes made to families these days. So could we add the phrase "to the best of our knowledge" or "to the best of my knowledge"? Because this is, once again, quite a broad undertaking. And it's difficult to circumscribe the effort. So that's a request I have for the opposition parties. Could they please define what exactly they mean by family and relatives? And could we also discuss the notion of prior to and what that means? And also whether they'd agree to add the phrase "to the best of my knowledge" in this motion. I was going to propose an amendment myself. I think we can all agree. I don't have a problem with waiting my turn, but if we're trying to keep the debate shorter, perhaps I could intervene now.
Respectful of the speaking order. So I do have to give the mic to Mr. Angus next, Mr. Keurig, Mr. Drouin, and
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam
Fortin.
Chair. I think we can put a few things in perspective based on yesterday. I think one of the difficulties that the government has found themselves in is the decision by the we and the Kielburgers not to be put their name under the lobbying registry, so we don't know how they engage with government, and I think that's very problematic. Small charities, all manner of charities, are on the lobbying registry for transparent reasons. The fact that the Kielburgers felt they didn't need to register with the lobbying commissioner, I think, has caused them a great deal of difficulty, and it's certainly hurt the government. So there's a question in terms of relations that's important. In terms of family, I'd like to put a few things on the table. One is that we were initially led to believe that the Prime Minister's family were paid because of, Margaret Trudeau is an amazing public figure, and I could certainly see why she has a strong career. But what we found out yesterday that was really shocking was that the board at We were told that nobody was paid, and yet the Trudeaus were paid. And when the Kielburger brothers were pressed on that, they said that they weren't paid for their speaking fees. They were paid for the after events. So it was the corporate involvement that becomes very problematic for the Prime Minister. And I think that that's something that the Ethics Commissioner will follow up on. Because, and this is nothing whether the Prime Minister was aware of it or not, it creates the image of trying to use the Prime Minister's family and name to get access or to give access to corporate interests, I think is highly problematic and so it raises the judgment certainly on the We organization. I appreciate my Liberal colleagues mentioning all their families, the Irish Catholics. God Almighty, I hope your family doesn't party with my family. It would go on for weeks, I bet. And I understand people saying that they don't want to use families. And yet yesterday the Liberals research shop came up that my daughter had been involved in with the Kielburger brothers, and they mentioned it in the national hearing. So I think I should put on the record how this is played out. The fact that my daughter, when she was in grade 7, raised money for Nicaragua before I was a member of Parliament does not in any way mean I am going to support this $900 million deal or oppose it. It's completely irrelevant, but the Liberals did mention it. And that's not the first time my children were named. I came across, and I'm just putting it on the record, my daughter, who was in grade 5, gave a speech about the children in Attawapiskat at the little St. Pat's grade school in Cobalt, Ontario. And I found that in a briefing note to Minister Chuck Strahl by the Department of Indian Affairs, that my daughter, who was in grade 5, was giving a speech on the conditions of children in Attawapiskat. And her name was listed, and I'm only mentioning her as well because it's her birthday today, and I would really like to see her. But family do get drawn in whether it's right or wrong. So I put that on the table. I have a problem with this motion for a couple of reasons. One is that what we do here is we create precedent. This is like law. And I have been on both sides. Well, I've been on opposition all my time, but I've been under Liberals and Conservatives. And we have to decide when we make a precedent here how it could be used in the future. So we have to be careful. Fishing expeditions, I believe, are beyond the purview of a committee. We have to have reason, specific reason, to ask for specific things because we have enormous powers here. We're not a court. If we vote on this and decide to go ahead, we have powers that are unique to our committee as parliamentarians. So there needs to be a judiciousness about them. To have such a wide cast in terms of cabinet that draws in family certainly raises questions to me. I don't think that that's in order. And we do also have a tradition in Parliament, which I sometimes have questioned, but taking the honourable member at their word, that is the Westminster tradition. We have to have a reason in order to investigate someone. We can't just say, prove to me that you're innocent, and then I'll believe that you're innocent. We actually have to have a reason because our parliamentary tradition is based on that principle. And as far as conflicts go, we have to provide those conflicts to the Conflict of Interest Commissioner, which is outside the purview of this committee. So I think I understand what my colleague's attempting to get here, but I do think if we set this precedent, this will be used again for other purposes that may be even more nefarious, and we have to be careful of the tools that we have. So I cannot support this at this time.
Mr. Keurig.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I look forward to I think addressing a few of the concerns that some of my colleagues have brought forward. And first, before I go into some of the specifics of that, I think that it is foundational that members of Parliament, that Canada's Parliament in general, holds Canada's government to account. That MPs are able to, whether it be in the format of question period, whether it be in the role as members of a committee, that MPs are able to hold their government to account. This is not asking every MP. This is not asking anybody. It's not asking for a fishing expedition, but rather it's asking for some questions to be answered related to a $1 billion decision that members of Canada's government, the cabinet, they made a decision. We're simply, as members of Parliament, I believe, entitled to be able to ask the question very simply, what knowledge was there first? That each member of cabinet require that they disclose whether or not they had knowledge of relationships between the individuals and we, and it goes on with a number of the we entities. That's a simple yes or no question. Did they have that knowledge or did they not? When it comes to the question of prior, I think that there was a decision made at a cabinet meeting, and was there an understanding of the conflicts of interest that existed or not? Quite simple. When it comes to, and that's a question that as MPs, we need to be able to ask those who are tasked with making decisions for the government. When it comes to the second part, and I would put on the record, Madam Chair, I find it very, very interesting. You know, a number of concerns with the motion have been brought up, and that's well taken. I appreciate the members opposite would share their concerns. I do find it, however, troubling that those concerns were not brought up with a suggestion to make a change that would make it more palatable. Whether it be adding to the best of their knowledge, as Ms. Breer mentioned, we could be more definitive in terms of a family relationship. I come from a fifth generation in Canada. I can't even hardly imagine we were supposed to have a family reunion this summer, and it would have been in the hundreds of people attending. Now, because of COVID, that's been put on hold. But so that is well taken. However, I do find it troubling that they would have cause for concern, yet not bring forward a solution to remediate those concerns in the name of transparency. And it's troubling because I think that, and certainly my constituents are demanding answers on all of these questions. And I think it is incumbent upon members of Parliament to ensure that we ask them. So certainly I would be happy to entertain amendments that would assuage some of the concerns that do exist. I would hope that if those amendments were made, that other members of this committee would consider getting on board with ensuring that we can get the information that is required. And it was asked about a part. The comment was made by Mr. Fergus about looking for partisan advantage. I think that a lot of the work, and I think back to the first number of meetings that we had in this committee, where there was a lot of nonpartisan work. We I think had a very constructive dialogue back and forth about the direction of this committee, and yet here we are today discussing a series of issues and related to an unprecedented scandal that the government faces, and it is incumbent upon all of us to get answers. To me, that's the furthest thing from looking for partisan advantage. You have the Prime Minister having apologized. You have a whole bunch of cabinet ministers acknowledging a certain level of involvement, some apologizing, some not, some further questions that continue to be raised on a daily basis. That's not partisan. That's called accountability, and that's why we're here as members of Parliament. The comment was made by Ms. Shanahan about the net being cast wide, and that's fair. I appreciate that. So let's define what those family relationships should look like, and I would hope that if we could do that, we could come up with a consensus that we could move forward in a way that speaks to the nonpartisan objective here, which is getting answers for Canadians. And defining that net is something that certainly I would be happy to entertain. And I know those comments were echoed by Mr. Angus in relationship to the precedent we set, because I agree, especially the Westminster system that we have. Precedent is foundational to the way that we conduct ourselves. But transparency and accountability is part of that precedent, and certainly that's the intent of this motion, is to ask the question, get answers to the relationships that may or may not exist. And I think Canadians are generally very understanding when the best attempts and efforts are made to simply get those answers. So with that, I look forward to continuing the debate, but I would encourage members to consider that offer, that certainly there's a willingness on my part to entertain some amendments that would make this more amenable. And I would quite frankly look forward to support by all MPs from all parties to ensure that we can get here to the objective, which is accountability for Canadians. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente, et je dois...
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I must admit that I'm not usually a member of this committee, as are the others around the table, but I would have a few comments to add. Further to other comments heard so far, and it has to do with political ties and family and relationships. I know that the MP across the table is open to some amendments, and perhaps we can come back to that discussion a bit later. But I do think we need to determine what exactly a business relationship is for a politician. I think it is up to us to define that, because that is the nature of the conflict. In fact, it's not really up to us. If there are going to be conflict of interests, or if there turn out to be conflicts of interest, and this needs to be codified, I think we should have the ethics commissioner before us, or previous ethics commissioners come and educate us on that question and propose solutions.
It's incumbent on all of us to have a lot more information than just before we even propose an amendment, because I think we ourselves can come up with a definition, but I think we should probably have the ethics commissioner and former ethics commissioner in front of this committee in order to inform us on what would be deemed a connection or a problematic connection when and or if there is a contract issued, which is the issue at hand we're dealing with. So I would just say perhaps we could take it offline and have that discussion, but I don't know if we would come up with the right definition for what you're looking for in your motion. I would say probably it'd be best to have as I said, a few witnesses here before, and then we could produce the documentation that is requested in that particular motion. So I'd say let's probably take it offline. Let's have a discussion, and then we can see where this goes. But I do raise caution on us defining the word connection by ourselves without having an informed debate and witnesses in front of this committee. Merci.
Thank you.
Mr. Fortin, and then it goes to Mr. Barrett, Mr. Fergus, Ms. Shanahan, and Mr. Keurig.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't repeat everything that was already said around the table, but I can tell you that I agree with just about everything that was said. We understand the concern with, well, first of all, adopting a motion that is effective or efficient, that's effective so that we can move ahead on it. But we have to show common sense. We can't ask people to investigate their own families. So I have a simple amendment to suggest, Madam Chair, that the last paragraph be drafted a bit like the first one.
Disclose, j'enlèverais whether they...
I would remove whether their families or their relatives, and I would replace that...
Ou meilleur, je veux dire en français.
I'll say it in French because I don't have the motion before me in French. It's a bit problematic. I'm amending a text in English, but anyway. To the best of their knowledge, their immediate families, whether their immediate families have connections to we and all the rest stays the same. So, to the best of their knowledge, is there a connection between... Thank you.
Pour dire qu'au meilleur de leur connaissance.
just to say that to the best of their knowledge, do they have any such connections? And my colleague across the way, I can tell him that it may be difficult to define what exactly a connection is. If we're defining connections, if to the best of my knowledge, let's say that I was a cabinet member, how would I react to such a request? If I'm being asked about my whole family, all my relatives, all my friends, do they have connections with we? Well, that is problematic. As Mr. Fergus said, it can become extremely complex to say, well, what about my neighbor that I have a beer with every 2 or 3 weeks? Is anyone in their family have a connection to we? That's too complicated. We're not going to ask people to investigate their own neighbors and families. But to say to the best of your knowledge, to the best of your knowledge, for example, does anyone in your inside your family or relatives or friends have any connections with we? Well, if I know that my sister worked for we, or if my nephew worked at we, then I'd say yes. I know that this person or that person worked at we or went to a cocktail party hosted by we or something like that. But to the best of my knowledge, I don't have to ask my sister, oh, by the way, do you have a connection with we? No, it's to the best of my knowledge. So I think that we could get rid of some concerns, and the concerns are legitimate. But if we say to the best of your knowledge, does anyone in your immediate family have connections with we and all the rest? So that is my proposed amendment, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Proceeding to the amendment then, first on my speakers list is Mr. Barrett.
Okay, thanks, Madam Chair, and I'll thank the block member for his amendment. I think it's very reasonable. We heard a half an hour of interventions from the government members, and no amendments were proposed. And we did get a view of some family trees, and so that's we're all richer having heard about that. I think the spirit of Mr. Keurik's motion makes a lot of sense. It's apparent that there's a lack of judgment and adult supervision in Justin Trudeau's office. This is the sad reality that we have to face. He's twice been found guilty of breaking the law. Ethics laws, 2 times. The finance minister, 1 time. Now, both of them, both Justin Trudeau and Bill Morneau, are under investigation again. So media asked Cabinet these questions. Did you know? Crickets from them. So who's going to find out? So to Mr. Angus's point, we take them at their word. Okay, all of the ministers, would the Liberal members on the committee vote for this motion if all Liberal ministers who've spoken to media or on the public record about their knowledge, that we exclude them from the motion, would that satisfy the committee? It's not a fishing expedition. Did you have knowledge of the personal relationships? Question 1. And then with the amended motion, we're asking if Cabinet members, to the best of their knowledge, know about their immediate family or relatives' connections. We're not asking what they are. I'm not asking who your nephew is, where he works, or what his connection is. They'd respond to the chair and say, yes, I do have family connections. Then it would be for the committee to decide what to do with that. Do we call that member before the committee, or do we refer that matter to the ethics commissioner? Well, we could do that. But the most important part of what we're finding out here is who knew. We're looking at what safeguards are in place. Well, Cabinet obviously isn't a sufficient safeguard. I knew that Margaret Trudeau was speaking for we. I knew that Sacha Trudeau was speaking for we. How did that escape the attention of the federal cabinet and PCO? How did that happen? These arguments are a red herring. Mr. Garrettson sat there last week. The conversation came up and said, okay, let's go home. Okay, well, if that was genuine, and if there were questions, there were no questions to Mr. I'll look for an off-camera response from Mr. Keurig. Were there any questions to your personal email account from government members looking for clarification or collaboration on the motion? And he's indicated there was not. So this isn't collaborative. There's no cooperation here. We're ragging the puck again. We've been through one of your filibusters on this committee already. It's a cover-up, guys. That's what this is. You're complicit in a cover-up. There's no question that there's a prima facie case on our hands of ethics violations. There's no question. It's under investigation. I wrote the ethics commissioner. He confirmed he would investigate based on the facts that were presented. Mr. Angus wrote the ethics commissioner. We both raised some of the same points, some different points. And guess what? Investigations are underway. If a lesson was learned the first time that Justin Trudeau broke ethics laws, I would believe that he was sorry. If Bill Morneau was really ready to take accountability for breaking ethics laws, and if he was sorry, he would have read the act. He didn't. We heard at the last committee he didn't. At finance, well, I think they gave it to me when I first got elected. Yikes. You've got to be kidding me. You broke the law and you didn't even take the time to read it. I've got to tell you, I've got to tell you, if I was sitting in the defendant's chair in the prisoner's box in court, I'd probably take a look at the criminal code section for which I was being tried. I would expect the same is true for conflict of interest violations. The act as if it's innocent mistakes and who would know and how would I know? I take proactive steps to ensure that I am in compliance with the rules that govern us as parliamentarians. I hope there's an opportunity at some point, if anyone doubts that we perhaps I can ask my advisor in the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner's office if she could provide an indication with my consent of how often I contact her to confirm compliance about correspondence, about meetings, about people offering invitations to events. All legitimate functions in my role as MP. Am I being overcautious? Maybe. I'm also not under investigation. I've also not been found to have broken the act. I would expect the same of any of the 337 other members who occupy seats in the chamber. Is it not too much to ask the same of the federal cabinet? None of you are in cabinet. You aspire to be, as do I. I hope that in the next election, we form a conservative government. I see Mr. Drouin doesn't think that's going to come to pass. I don't know, but we're going to. He says he doesn't have hopes for cabinet. Well, but as members, we have an obligation to be a check against the power in the executive. That's our job. That's our job. I imply that there's been no offer made to any of you in exchange for your defense of the government today. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you don't have to do it. What you do have to do for Canadians is exercise your role to ensure that there's transparency and accountability. Immediate family, to the best of your knowledge. Yes or no? It's basically a yes or no question. Disclose whether they had knowledge of the personal relationships between, is what that sentence says. That's a yes or no question. Additionally, the letter should require that all members of cabinet disclose to the best of their knowledge whether their immediate families have connections to we. It doesn't ask what those connections are. These are eminently reasonable amendments to a well-intentioned motion that is consistent with the study that this committee is undertaking. It's absolutely in the public interest that this go forward. Not supporting this motion is complicity in a cover-up. That's what we're faced with here. I've heard, Canadians have heard your points about you believing the motion was too broad. Mr. Fortin has amended the motion very reasonably. It's tightened up. I think that's very appropriate. I think the amendments were very appropriate. I will support them. And I hope that members opposite support it. And I hope that we can get to voting on the main motion. The meeting's to adjourn at 2. It would be unfortunate to have to carry this into this motion into a third meeting. Just have the courage of your convictions. If you don't like it, vote it down. If you think that it needs to be amended, if you think that there's changes warranted, make the amendment. Let's not just fill the speakers list for the sake of running out the clock. Everyone has important things to do. It's Mr. Angus's daughter's birthday. My gift to Mr. Angus is that I'm going to encourage everyone to expeditiously move forward with this motion and vote for it. I obviously hope you vote in favor of it, but if not, stand up and be counted. That's show business.
Mr. Fergus and then Mr. Keurig.
Madam Chair, usually I think most people would, if you were to describe me, would consider me pretty mild and a pretty even-keeled fellow. But I have to admit, the statements, the most recent statements from my honorable colleague across the way has frankly, I find insulting, and I also find presumptuous and wrong-headed. And I don't say that lightly. How dare that member ascribe to me what my intentions are? That I want to go to cabinet, or other members here want to go to cabinet. You don't know. You could speak for yourself, and you did. Good for you. You want to be in cabinet? I don't care. But Madam Chair, I always felt, and I've been mocked by the member opposite before, and I mentioned how much I'm a student of Parliament, and I love the parliamentary tradition that we have. I've followed it since a very young age. To me, the highest honor I have was the one that I got on October 19th, 2015, when I became a member of Parliament for Hull Elmer, and to represent the community in which I lived for almost 30 years. So I hope the member will stick to his knitting and not choose to try to speak for other people. And I also find it particularly rich, in an ironic sense, that the member criticizes for what he would say is talking out the clock, when it was the very same member for 2 full meetings of this committee who talked the clock out because he wasn't able to get his way on a motion that he was introducing. And Madam Chair, it's just very rich that he would make that accusation of other people, who I think for a lot more substantive reasons, and one which seems to be convincing other people, even I think even himself, in terms of being willing to change or try to put some barriers on a motion that is so wide and large. So, Madam Speaker, I think that is, he should, again, speak to the issues and not try to put words in other people's mouths. He also indicates that he's looking, he criticizes people for trying to fix a mistake that his colleague had introduced. When I think if somebody had given some thought, more consideration, let me correct myself, given more consideration to the issue, would have come to the point of saying, you know what, this is just too big and too wide, and it's a bit of a fishing expedition. And if the motion were presented on its own merits, it would have failed under this committee. So, Madam Speaker, I find it's important that when we are coming here that we try to stick to the issues. we try to address those concerns, try to assume and not mock people's backgrounds or the issues that they raise or the families that they may have, and in an attempt perhaps to cover up for the things that they didn't do so correctly or with due diligence that would have received more support from people around this table. And I hope this is the only time, Madam Chair, that I will have to make such a personal intervention again. Thank you.
Mr. Fergus, thank you. Mr. Keurig, and that finishes my speaking list.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. To the amendment, I appreciate my bloc colleagues' amendment because that is, I think, the conversation of this debate thus far, and I'm not speaking regarding the debate for the amendment, but rather the debate on the motion, has been largely from the members of the government and the NDP has been that it's too broad. So I appreciate that my bloc colleague would put action to actually solve the problem. And certainly I will be supporting this because I think and I believe that it is the role of committees to work together, to come up with solutions where there's disagreement, that we can have a collaborative effort to ensure that that the job gets done. You know, I make a comment, and this was prior to being elected, but being a student of politics and passionate about this, our democratic institutions. When I would hear of friends or family, or now when I invite constituents to come visit in Ottawa, I tell them very clearly, you need to come and check out question period. It's fun, it's back and forth, especially being from probably the most conservative riding in the country. There's a lot of fun to be had when it comes to the jabs and whatnot that are traded back and forth in question period. But I tell them, always, don't simply go to question period if you're not able to stop in for a few minutes and listen to committee. Because that's where a lot of the substantive work of Parliament gets done. So my bloc colleague put that into action by proposing an amendment, which, if I am to take the members opposite at their word, addresses the concerns that they brought forward regarding this motion. So I appreciate that, and I plan to support it. And I would make one note, Madam Chair. I've heard numerous times from members opposite that this committee's, I've heard a lot about the committee mandate, and conveniently the last paragraph of that mandate is often omitted from the conversations we've had over the last number of weeks, which is unfortunate because we need to look at the mandate in terms of its entirety. But time and time again, we have members opposite suggest that we let the ethics commissioner do their job, and then we invite the ethics commissioner to the committee. I'm in 100% agreement with that. However, I was appalled, and although a strong word, I was appalled that when we brought forward a motion to do just that, back in, I believe it was the beginning of February, that members opposite voted against having the ethics commissioner come to testify regarding Trudeau Report 2. It is incredibly unfortunate that, and in fact, I look forward to being able to bring up the number of times that members opposite have simply suggested that it's this committee's job to bring the ethics commissioner back to sit in that chair to testify, because that's simply not what happened. We have an opportunity here to shed light, to open the doors on the issues, on a scandal that is rocking the confidence that Canadians need to be able to have in their government. And until we can shed light in the darkness, so to speak, I think that there are further questions that need to be asked about anybody who wouldn't participate in that process. So I thank the block member for his amendment, and I will certainly support that. And again, encourage all members to look at this as a solution to the challenges that they had with the initial motion. And hopefully we can, in an expeditious manner, move forward to shed light where light needs to be shed.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to respond to Mr. Fergus and just make sure it's on the record that in February, this committee had the opportunity to bring the Ethics Commissioner to sit and testify to the Trudeau report too. That was the second time that Justin Trudeau was found to have broken the law during his time as Prime Minister. A national shame. And we keep hearing that it's historic that the Prime Minister has agreed to testify at committee. Well, it's historic that he's under investigation for a third time for breaking the law. So yes, I filibustered against the Liberal cover-up in February. You tried to cover up the report. You didn't want it read into committee, which is highly unusual. And then you filibustered for your next cover-up. So it's and I hear Mr. Fergus and Mr. Drouin talking about how they're now in minority, and that's because your Prime Minister broke the law last time. You have the distinction of having your wings clipped from your majority government when Canadians put you on notice for having a government that could not follow the rule of law. That's your legacy, is supporting that Prime Minister. So I am proud to say that I did filibuster against a Liberal cover-up, and I'm proud today to call out your filibuster in favor of your next cover-up. And so that's for you to reconcile with yourselves. But I'm glad you sleep well at night, Mr. Drouin. But that's your shame. And Canadians that are listening can ask Mr. Drouin about that when they contact him. But for my part, in this committee, I will make sure that it is heard that there's a reasonable motion put forward.
Point of order. I know as a male MP that we all get hot under the collar, but I don't think it's fair for someone to be said that they have to live with shame for making a decision. The member can present the opposite. I've heard all the arguments, but I don't think people need to be ashamed of why they're here. They're here, so I just ask them to temper his length.
Mr. Barrett.
It is a shame. People should be ashamed of covering up corruption. They should be ashamed of covering up a Prime Minister who has broken the law. So that's not language that needs to be tempered. That's contrition that needs to be offered by those that support it.
On the amendment put forward by Mr. Fontaine. Yes. I'll allow the clerk to conduct that. Nope.
On the amendment of Mr. Fortin, all those in favor, please say yea when your name is called. All those opposed, please say nay when your name is called. Madame Bruyère. Mr. Dong. Mr. Fergus. Mr. Drouin.
No.
Madam Shanahan. Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Mr. Keurig.
I vote yes.
Mr. Duncan.
Yes.
Mr. Fortin.
Oui.
Mr. Angus.
Nope.
With the final vote coming out with 4 yes and 6 no, the amendment is not adopted. Moving back to the motion then, currently on my speaking list, I have Mr. Barrett, Mr. Fergus, Ms. Shanahan, and Mr. Keurig. Ideally, we would be able to bring this to a vote within 10 minutes' time. I leave it to the committee. Mr. Barrett.
Madam Chair, we heard the suggestions that were raised by Liberal members that the scope should be narrowed on the main motion. And that was proposed by the bloc, and they voted against it. So I think I think we know that that a productive discussion is not going to be had, and I encourage all members to stand and be counted. Let's vote on the main motion.
Je vais cesser de.
I will stop making it a little more personal, but I'd simply like to point out that it's the second time a similar motion was moved by members of the Conservative Party. Both times. So the first time they withdrew it. Now they've presented more or less the same motion. And once again, this motion was very poorly drafted. I salute my bloc colleagues' efforts who tried to improve the motion. But, Madam Chair, the fact remains that the motion is poorly drafted. It's not up to me, and I can only speak for myself, but I imagine the same holds true for several of my colleagues. It's not up to me to correct a second attempt. Poorly prepared effort by the Conservatives. So listen, I'll do what I can to help remedy this situation. But, you know, the second time, the first time, sure, anyone can make mistakes. And then one tries to correct those. But the second time, for the second time, the Conservatives have come here with a motion that, well, anyway, we'll see, but it seems that it's not deemed to be a good motion by this committee. So
shame on you, you know. Fool me once, I think the expression is. Alors voilà.
So there we have it. I think this is what we have before us. I ask my colleagues to vote against this motion for all kinds of reasons. We don't want to go back to a time where the Ethics Committee was being used for witch hunts, as it was by previous governments. We should be using this committee, to support and reinforce the work of our independent parliamentary officers' work, so they can do their job properly. We ask them what resources they need to ensure that they have all the tools they require to do their work properly. I think it's very important for us to reinforce these roles. In doing that work, in supporting those parliamentary officers, we can ensure that they are the ones, not us, to conduct investigations on ourselves, on our colleagues, on all MPs. That is the best way to proceed. I know that it's not as satisfying for those who could gain political advantages, but this is the way we should proceed. It is actually in everyone's best interest. It's in everyone's best interest. So, Madam Chair, I will be voting against this motion for the reasons I've just listed, but especially in the hope of arriving at a moment in which, rather than playing these partisan games at committee, that we rather support the people to whom we've given the responsibility to look after that. So I will be voting against this motion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. A couple of final comments here in the last few moments. I find it interesting that the members opposite have changed their tact. Went from going, looking at the motion for a few technical things that could be adjusted to, talk about the scope of family, a few definitions and whatnot, to now they just don't like it. Won't be supporting it. Well, I took it very seriously, some of the issues that were brought to my attention from the initial motion, and asked that it be withdrawn from the committee because I wanted to ensure that it was something that could be palatable brought forward. And as was mentioned earlier, I didn't receive any feedback from any members outside of my own caucus on that matter. There was an opportunity, and it wasn't taken advantage of. We heard the debate at the beginning of this meeting, debate at the last meeting, talking about the scope and family and whatnot. They didn't propose an amendment. My colleague from the bloc did. They voted against it. Oh, and I would note that that previous motion, it was with unanimous consent that it was withdrawn. So the Liberals opposite agreed to that, I would note for the record. So they've changed this tact, and it's obvious that what could have been an opportunity to shed light on the ethical failings of the government and to simply ensure that light is shone on all aspects of where these relationships may or may not exist. Canadians deserve to know. My constituents are asking very, very clearly that I get answers as their representative in Canada's Parliament. And I'd be very, very surprised, and I don't want to speak for what the other members of this committee may be hearing from their constituents, but I have a suspicion that their constituents would like answers as well. So what started as a gesture of goodwill, a willingness to adjust the motion so it would be more amenable to some of the concerns raised, has now just turned into, as my colleague suggested, something that looks like more of a cover-up. And I think that's incredibly unfortunate. We had the opportunity, and still have the opportunity, to see light shone on what was a decision of cabinet. This was a decision of cabinet. This wasn't every member of Parliament. This was decisions of cabinet members of the Queen's Privy Council. They have a responsibility to understand conflicts of interest, understand family relationships in that regard. And quite frankly, even with the wording, although I did support the amendment, even with the wording, I think that Canadians understand what we're trying to accomplish here, and that's to get answers. So I would encourage all members of this committee from all parties to take a good, hard look at what they're going to say to their constituents on their doorsteps when they had an opportunity to shed light on such an important issue. And with that, I would close my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keurig. We will now allow Mr. Keurig's motion that a letter would be sent from the chair to the members of the cabinet. We will allow that motion to stand for vote. Mr. Barrett, we would love to make that a recorded vote.
On the motion of Mr. Keurig, all those in favor, please say yay. All those opposed, please say nay when I call your name. Madame Bruyère. Mr. Dong. Mr. Fergus.
No.
Monsieur Drouin.
No.
Madame Shanahan.
No.
Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Mr. Duncan.
Yes.
Mr. Courig.
I vote yes.
Monsieur Fortin.
Oui.
Mr. Angus.
No.
We have 4 voting yes and 6 voting no. The motion does not pass. Mr. Fergus, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'd like to take this opportunity to apologize to you for making some of my comments very personal today. I will endeavor not to do so in the future.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fergus. That was very kind. With that, ladies and gentlemen, this committee is now adjourned.